Vaclav Havel assumes the presidency of Czechoslovakia. My dear fellow citizens, for 40 years on this day you heard from my predecessors the same thing in a number of variations. How our country is flourishing, how many millions of tons of steel we produce, how happy we all are, how we trust our government, and what bright prospects lie ahead of us. I assume you did not propose for me for this office so that I, too, should lie to you. Our country is not flourishing. The enormous creative and spiritual potential of our nations is being wasted. Entire branches of industry produce goods that are of no interest to anyone, and while we lack the things we need, the state, which calls itself a workers' state, humiliates and exploits workers. An outmoded economy wastes what little energy we have. A country that once could be proud of the educational level of its citizens now spends so little on education that it ranks 72nd in the world. We have polluted our land, rivers, and forests, bequeathed to us by our ancestors. We now have the most contaminated environment in all of Europe. People in our country die sooner than in the majority of European countries. Allow me a small personal observation. When I recently flew to Bratislava, I found some time during various discussions to look out of the window of the plane. I saw the industrial complex of the Slovnaft chemical plant and the giant Pestrelska housing project right behind it. The view was enough for me to understand that for decades our statesmen and political leaders did not look or did not want to look out the windows of their airplanes. No study of statistics available would have enabled me faster and better to understand the situation we have gotten ourselves into. But all this is not even the main problem. The worst thing is that we live in a contaminated moral environment. We have fallen morally ill because we became used to saying one thing and thinking another. We have learned not to believe in anything, to ignore each other, to care only about ourselves. Notions such as love, friendship, compassion, humility, or forgiveness have lost their depth and dimensions. For many of us, they represent nothing more than psychological idiosyncrasies, or appear to be some kind of relic from times past, rather comical in the era of computers and spaceships. Only a few of us manage to cry out loud that the powers that be should not be all-powerful, that the special farms producing uncontaminated, top-quality food just for the powerful should send their produce to schools, children's homes, and hospitals. The previous regime, armed with its arrogant and intolerant ideology, reduced man to a means of production and nature to a tool of production. Thus it attacked both their very essence and their mutual relationship. It reduced gifted and autonomous people to nuts and bolts in some monstrously huge, noisy, and stinking machine, whose real purpose is not clear to anyone. Such a machine can do nothing but slowly and inexorably wear itself out along with all its nuts and bolts. When I talk about the contaminated moral atmosphere, I am not talking about the gentlemen who eat organic vegetables and do not look out the windows of their planes. I mean all of us. We have all become used to the totalitarian system and accepted it as immutable fact, thus helping to perpetuate it. In other words, we are all, though naturally to various degrees, responsible for the creation of the totalitarian machinery. None of us is just its victim. We are all responsible for it. Why do I say this? It would be very unwise to think of the sad legacy of the last 40 years as something alien or something inherited from a distant relative. On the contrary, we have to accept this legacy as something we have inflicted on ourselves. If we accept it as such, we will understand that it is up to all of us, and only us, to do something about it. We cannot blame the previous rulers for everything, not only because it would be untrue, but also because it could weaken our sense of duty, our obligation to act independently, freely, sensibly, and quickly. Let us not be mistaken. Even the best government in the world, the best parliament, and the best president cannot do much on their own. And in any case, it would be wrong to expect a cure-all from them alone. Freedom and democracy, after all, require everyone to participate and thus to share responsibility. If we realize this, then all the horrors that the new Czechoslovak democracy has inherited will cease to appear so horrific. If we realize this, hope will return to our hearts. In the effort to rectify matters of common concern, we have something to build on. The recent past, and in particular the last 6 weeks of our peaceful revolution, has shown the enormous human, moral, and spiritual potential. The civic culture that has slumbered in our society beneath the mask of apathy. Whenever someone categorically claimed that we were this or that, I always objected that society is a very mysterious creature, and that it is not wise to trust the face it chooses to show you. I am happy I was not mistaken. People all around the world wondered how those meek, humiliated, cynical citizens of Czechoslovakia, who seemed to believe in nothing, found the strength to cast off the totalitarian system in several weeks, and do it in a decent and peaceful manner. And let us ask, where did young people who never knew another system get their longing for truth, their love of free thought, their political imagination, their civic courage, and their civic prudence? How did their parents, precisely the generation thought to be lost, join them? How is it possible that so many people immediately grasped what had to be done without needing anyone else's advice or instructions? I think there are 2 main reasons. First of all, people are never merely a product of the external world. They are always able to respond to something superior, however systematically the external world tries to snuff out that ability. Second, humanistic and democratic traditions, about which there has been so much idle talk, did after all slumber in the subconscious of our nations and national minorities. These traditions were inconspicuously passed from one generation to another, so that each of us could discover them at the right time and transform them into deeds. Of course, we had to pay for our present freedom. Many citizens died in prison in the 1950s. Many were executed. Thousands of human lives were destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of talented people were forced to leave the country. Those who defended the honor of our nations during World War II, those who rebelled against the totalitarian rule, those who simply managed to remain themselves and think freely, all were persecuted. We should not forget any of those who paid for our present freedom in one way or another. Independent courts should consider the possible guilt of those who were responsible for the persecutions, so that the whole truth about our recent past is fully revealed. We must also bear in mind that other nations have paid even more dearly for their present freedom, and that indirectly they have also paid for ours. The rivers of blood that flowed in Hungary, Poland, Germany, and not long ago in such a horrific manner in Romania, and the sea of blood shed by the nations of the Soviet Union must not be forgotten, because all human suffering concerns every human being. But the sacrifices of those peoples must not be forgotten also because their suffering forms the tragic background to our own newfound freedom and to the gradual emancipation of the nations of the Soviet bloc. Without the changes in the Soviet Union, Poland, Hungary, and East Germany, what happened here could scarcely have taken place, and certainly not in such a calm and peaceful manner. The fact that we enjoyed optimal international conditions does not mean that someone has directly supported us during the recent weeks. In fact, after hundreds of years, both our nations have raised their heads high without relying on the help of stronger countries. It seems to me that this constitutes the great moral asset of the present moment. This moment holds within itself the hopes that in the future we will no longer suffer from the complexes of those indebted to someone else. Now it is solely up to us whether the promise of this moment will be fulfilled and whether our civic, national, and political self-respect will be revived. Self-respect is not pride. Quite the contrary. Only a person or a nation with self-respect, in the best sense of the word, is capable of listening to others while accepting them as equals, of forgiving enemies while expiating their own sins. Let us try to infuse our communities with this kind of self-respect. Let our country's behavior on the international stage be marked by this kind of self-respect. Only then will we restore our self-confidence, our respect for one another, and our respect for other nations. Our state should never again be an appendage or a poor relative of any other state. While it is true that we must accept and learn many things from other countries, we must do so as an equal partner who has something to offer. Our first president, T.G. Masaryk, wrote, Jesus, not Caesar. Thus he followed our philosophers, Chalkiki and Comenius. I dare to say that we may even have an opportunity to spread this idea abroad, to introduce a new element into European and global politics. Our country, if that is what we want, can now permanently radiate love, understanding, and the power of the spirit and of ideas. It is precisely this glow that we can offer as our contribution to international politics. Masaryk rooted his politics in morality. Let us try, in a new era and in a new way, to restore this conception of politics. Let us teach ourselves and others that politics should be animated by the desire to contribute to the community rather than by the need to cheat or rape the community. Let us teach ourselves and others that politics can be not only the art of the possible, especially if this means speculations, calculations, intrigues, secret deals, and pragmatic maneuvering, but also the art of the impossible, namely, the art of improving ourselves and the world. We are a small country, yet at one time we were the spiritual crossroads of Europe. Is there any reason why we could not regain that distinction? Would it not be a way to repay those whose help we are going to need? Our homegrown mafia, those who do not look out of the windows of their planes and eat specially fed pigs, may still linger in our midst, muddying the waters from time to time, but it is no longer our main enemy. The international mafia of which it is a part is even less our enemy. Our main enemy today is our own bad habits, indifference to the common good, vanity, personal ambition, selfishness, and envy. The main struggle will have to be fought against these foes. Free elections and an election campaign lie ahead of us. Let us not allow this struggle to dirty the clean face of our gentle revolution. Let us not allow the world's sympathy, which we won so quickly, to be lost with equal speed in the coming skirmishes for power. Let us not allow selfish desires to bloom once again under the noble veil of the desire to serve the common good. It is not really important which party, club, or group will prevail in the elections. The important thing is that the winners will be the best of us, in the moral, civic, political, and professional sense, regardless of the winner's political affiliations. Future policies and prestige of our state will depend on the personalities that we shall select and later elect to our representative bodies. My dear fellow citizens, 3 days ago the deputies of the Federal Assembly, expressing your will, elected me President of the Republic. You therefore rightly expect that I should mention the tasks that I as President see before me. First of these is to use all my powers and influence to ensure that we shall soon step up to ballot boxes and free elections, and that our path toward this historic event will be dignified and peaceful. My second task is to guarantee that we will approach these elections as two genuinely self-governing nations, which mutually respect their interests, national identity, religious traditions, and symbols. As a Czech who swore his presidential oath to an eminent and personally close Slovak, I feel a special obligation, knowing the various bitter experiences that Slovaks have gone through in the past, to see to it that the interests of the Slovak nation are respected, and that the way to any state office, including the highest one, will never be closed to Slovaks in the future. My third task is to do everything in my power to improve the lot of children, old people, women, the sick, national minorities, and all citizens who for any reason are worse off than others. The best food or hospitals must no longer be prerogatives of the powers that be. They must first be offered to those who need them the most. As the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, I want to ensure that the defense capability of our country will no longer serve as a pretext for anyone to thwart peace initiatives, including the reduction of military service, the establishment of alternative military service, and the general humanization of military life. In our country, there are many prisoners who were convicted of serious crimes and are being punished for them. However, they had to undergo, in spite of the goodwill of some investigators, judges, and, above all, defense lawyers, a debased judiciary process that curtailed their rights. Now they live in prisons that, rather than attempting to awake the better qualities that inhere in every human being, humiliate people and destroy them physically and mentally. In view of this fact, I have decided to declare a relatively extensive amnesty. I ask the prisoners to understand that the damage caused by 40 years of unjust interrogations, trials, and imprisonments cannot be repaired overnight, and that all the changes that are being speedily prepared will nonetheless still require a certain amount of time. By rebelling, the prisoners will neither help society nor themselves. I also call upon the public not to fear the prisoners after they are released, not to make their lives difficult, and to help them in a Christian spirit to seek within themselves that which the prisons did not help them to find, the ability to repent and the desire to live an upright life. My honorable task is to strengthen the authority of our country in the world. I would be glad if other countries respected us for showing understanding, tolerance, and love of peace. I would be happy if Pope John Paul II and the Dalai Lama of Tibet could visit our country before the elections, if only for one day. I would be happy if our friendly relations with all nations were strengthened. I would be happy if we succeeded before the elections in establishing diplomatic relations with the Vatican and Israel. I would also like to contribute to peace by my brief visit tomorrow to our close neighbors, namely the German Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic of Germany. Nor shall I forget our other neighbors, Poland, Hungary, and Austria. In conclusion, I'd like to say that I want to be a president who will speak less and work more. To be a president who will not only look out the windows of his airplane, but who will always be among his fellow citizens and listen to them attentively. You may ask what kind of republic I dream of. Let me reply. I dream of a republic that is independent, free, and democratic. A republic with economic prosperity, yet social justice. A humane republic that serves the individual and therefore hopes that the individual will serve it in turn. A republic of well-rounded people, because without such people, it is impossible to solve any of our problems, whether they be human, economic, ecological, social, or political. The most distinguished of my predecessors opened his first speech with a quote from Comenius, the great Czech educator of the 17th century. Allow me to end my first speech with my own paraphrase of the same statement. My people, your government has returned to you.